Hey everyone, this is Andy, one of the co hosts of The Naked Diner. Today, we are reposting an old episode of ours. It's episode number 89 with co founder of the Satanic Temple, Lucien Greaves. This was done back in 2017. It was shortly after Lucien finished a conversation with Tucker Carlson over on Fox News. It was before the movie came out, Hail Satan. Hail Satan? There's a question mark at the end of that. And we talked about what you would expect us to talk about: Satanic Temple stuff, about church state separation, how not to do activism, and a little bit about Latin in the Black Mass. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Once again, we just ripped the audio, placed it in a very simple video. I hope you enjoy it. Please subscribe to the channel. Please upvote. Leave a comment. Thanks a lot. Bye.
So, Lucien, welcome back.
Thank you.
How are
things
things?
have gotten so bad that you've come back to the Naked Diner.
You've had a pretty busy month.
These are the better venues when things quiet down. I mean, you've seen how it goes on Fox.
Yeah.
Oh.
Never gives you much time to answer anything.
No, but I mean, to be fair, that's not just a Fox thing. Even when you talk to a reporter from your nationwide papers, they might talk to you for a while, but they'll put down what you said to maybe 5 words.
Yeah. I did want to get into some of that though, because I do think with the cakes thing, it was you were trying to make what I think is an interesting point about religion as a protected class, especially with those Jeff Sessions memos that went out the other week.
Right.
How now there's this weird, it seems like they're setting themselves up for a conflict where they're saying the employers can religiously discriminate against the employees, but the employees' religious freedoms can trump the employer sometimes too. So I don't know how they're going to, there's just going to be a bunch of lawsuits.
Yeah, it almost seems as though there's this kind of tacit push now that an employee is going to have to assimilate to the corporate religion. And that seems a real backward state of affairs. Sometimes I feel like these issues aren't being thought fully through before they're being deliberated on, especially in areas regarding religion.
Yeah. Well, it also seems like they're also saying that the individual has their religious freedom too, for like a pharmacy instance where someone doesn't want to prescribe birth control or whatever. They're saying that that's okay too. So how can it be both,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they've really thought about the nuances of this and how this will work in practice. I mean, this is all kind of up in the air now. We'll wait and see. It seemed like for a long time we were kind of operating smoothly. Everybody was doing business with one another. We didn't have any overt discriminatory policies on the books, and now because Christians just cannot stand the idea of that gay marriage is a thing now.
Mm-hmm.
The question of whether or not people are allowed to discriminate based on class, really, on whole categories of people, is now an issue again, and it seems entirely backward, but that's where we are.
Yeah. So you guys are having a big old black mass up there tomorrow night.
Yeah, you can come by.
I don't think I can make it. Although technically, I guess with the blog now, I can write off the airfare.
Yeah.
As long as
Well, we've got the corrected Latin. We've got everything geared up and ready to go. And we've been talking. We're all in agreement that we want people to leave the Black Mass feeling unsettled, maybe vaguely disgusted, and if they have any remnants of superstition left with them, we want them to worry that maybe they shouldn't have gone. And maybe they've been irreparably corrupted in some way, and that there's no turning back now.
Well, that sounds fascinating. I mean,
that's the spirit of the Black Mass. We're really trying to give it that blasphemous feel.
Yeah. So what is the history of the particular script that you're going by?
Well, it's based off the Huysmans' La Vaz Black Mass. But like I said, there was a version we had where the Latin wasn't quite correct. I think in LaVey's Satanic Rituals, he had a kind of poorly rendered version that we took to some kind of scholar. I don't remember whose job it was doing that, but we got it all corrected, got it all worked out, and we worked with some of the various scripts from history where we could amalgamate something into something workable where nobody had to actually be murdered.
Right.
So was it the fact that LaVey just got a few things wrong, or was he just going with pig Latin?
No, I don't know where he got his text from, honestly, but it wasn't correct in any case. So it needed some correcting. But my understanding was he threw those books together rather quickly as it was. Maybe not so much the rituals, but certainly the Bible.
Right, because he borrowed from a bunch of other sources.
Yeah, and according to sources I've read about that history, that was more or less because he was trying to put something together quickly. He had the deal with the publisher before he had any content.
Right. So
Always a wise economic model right there.
Yeah.
The Satanic Temple Arizona chapter presents Nihil Sanctum, our second annual ritual performance event at the Quarry in Bisbee, Arizona, Saturday, November 18th, 2017. On this night, we will publicly denounce religious arbitrary authority that has imposed their will upon our lives without our consent. Join us for this memorable evening filled with revelry and debauchery. Visit our website to buy tickets and to browse through the available merch packages that we have available. thesatanictemplearizona.com.
So I'm not sure what other stuff is up in the air right now. There's the abortion lawsuits in Missouri.
Yeah, the abortion lawsuit in Missouri that's a really encouraging development too. When you have the lower court saying to the Supreme Court, as they did in their opinion, that we have a legitimate and substantial grievance, that we have a real constitutional question that needs to be deliberated on. That's very favorable to us. Now we can finally start arguing the case on its merits. Everything else previously was procedural. It was just simply the courts looking for bureaucratic, procedural ways to deny deliberating on the merits of the case. So now when we get to the Supreme Court in Missouri, they're actually going to be talking about what we're fighting here. Now those issues of standing, whether we have the right to be represented to sue at all,
right,
are all cleared out of the way. And now the questions of whether our liberty protects us from these kinds of state restrictions is in question. And on that, we have a real strong case. And a lot of legal scholars agree that we've constructed a really solid legal case. But it's worth pointing out that before we brought this lawsuit into play, before we filed this suit, Malcolm, the other co-founder, and I spoke to a lot of lawyers because we didn't secure pro bono support. We had a lot of lawyers willing to help us, but we didn't have anybody in Missouri. And we were cold calling lawyers to try to get them to take this case. And we had a lot of them tell us they didn't understand the case. They didn't understand, they didn't feel we had anything to fight in this case at all. So we eventually we're working with a guy in New Jersey who got some kind of permission, some kind of temporary licensing. I don't know how it works in the legal field, to represent us in Missouri, and he has co-counsel with us in Missouri right now, and that helps him working back and forth. But anyways, I guess my point of all that is don't always trust your initial legal consultation, because if we had listened to the original lawyers, we would have they were essentially telling us we didn't have a constitutional claim, that there was some easy way in which this would be beaten down. And I just don't think they were thinking very creatively. They were looking at this law that didn't apply because this has never been brought to the courts before. And that was another surprising thing to me, is that we had lawyers telling us that they were hestant to take the case because this type of thing hadn't been litigated before.
They just didn't want to get into
I think
setting
that's where
precedent.
it's at. Isn't that a reason to do it? But
yeah, right. You'd
another
think
thing
that'd be
that's
one of those things
irritating
that they'd jump at.
on the legal front, though, I have to say I'm starting to get irritated by people who are jumping in to lawsuits without representation or without a real plan. I mean, to be more specific, I was just hearing a story about a self-described Satanist pushing a lawsuit against In God We Trust on money somewhere in
Chicago.
Illinois.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a fine idea to go and push the legal case against In God We Trust being on money. I don't think it should be there. I think it should come off. But if you feel like you just have a clever idea, no legal training, and you're going to be representing yourself in court, don't do it.
Yeah.
And then I was annoyed also this week to hear that somebody ran to the Colorado baker who turned down the same-sex couples, obviously inspired by our cake ploy, and asked him to make a cake for Satan. And this has gotten some headlines, and I'm sure that person's pretty fucking proud of getting some headlines. But if this person isn't a Satanist and they just want this guy to make a cake for Satan, it's probably not going to work. And when he turns this person down, if this person doesn't have a lawyer prepared, isn't prepared to file a suit, then this person has certainly not helped the cause in any way at all.
Right. I can tell you that wasn't someone from your Colorado chapter.
God damn it.
No, it wasn't.
Oh, you can tell me that.
Yeah, I can tell you that it wasn't. I checked when I saw the news.
Maybe you should have a 1-800 line against stupid Satan ideas or stupid ideas for activism.
Yeah. I mean, just be able to follow through. That's always been the problem. I don't know. I mean, we've seen that from the beginning since we started. There was a guy in Florida who kept trying to push church-state issues, but entirely on his own, like the vigilante of church-state issues.
Yeah,
Not a lawyer, didn't have legal representation lined up, but just going around getting refused on invocations and things like that, and then shouting about it, which really doesn't help at all.
Yeah, and I mean, I kind of get it because Satanists being Satanists, doing things independently, like kind of works out in your head why they would go and do something like that, but they need to think it through and realize that they could be setting very bad precedent in the long run.
Right. Yeah, don't fight a battle to lose.
Yeah, and don't just do it to stir people up. Have a plan.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. There's a lot more that goes into this than just throwing the idea out there, making the claim. You need to be able to come through on it. And you can be very right, but if you don't follow the right procedural protocol, your case is going to get thrown out. Yeah, and you can set bad precedent. You can make it more difficult for people to make this case in the future.
Speaking of, how are things with the Arkansas Baphomet statue fight? That's been kind of on hold until they put up the new Ten Commandments monument, right?
Yeah, that is on hold until they put up the new Ten Commandments monument. And I haven't heard anything about them putting up the new Ten Commandments monument. There were rumbles that it was going to go up about a couple weeks ago now, because it's been a while now.
Yeah.
But one of our locals suddenly realized that they had put orange cones around where the fallen monument once was, at the base of where it was knocked down. And so the thinking was that perhaps the monument was going up as early as that day. But apparently they just set orange cones there and nothing happened. Nothing happened yet.
They're stalling on putting it
but
up.
But you know they're going to put it there. And the senator who pushes for that Ten Commandments monument, he's profited in a massive way from this. When the Ten Commandments monument was knocked down by a crazed Christian, it turned out, in his car, screaming about separation of church and state, but who also ran over the Ten Commandments monument in Oklahoma, and that time was screaming about virus that was propagated by the late pop singer Michael Jackson. The senator started a fundraiser to replace it, and he set a goal. I think that was well beyond the actual cost of the monument, if I remember correctly. And but I do know that he got the full price to replace the monument from the producers of the Christian movies God's Not Dead. I think there's a 1, 2, and 3 of God's Not Dead right now.
They made a third one?
So what he's doing with that extra money, I have no idea. But it certainly hasn't. This has certainly been a boom for him and his business. And I think I honestly think that's why he doesn't seem to care very much whether or not this Ten Commandments monument will stay, which it certainly won't. As far as legal cases go that we have, I couldn't be more confident with this one. The Arkansas State Constitution is really, really clear about separating church and state and about not erecting memorials and monuments to one religion on the if it has any effect on the public's money or in the public space. I forget the exact wording in the Arkansas State Constitution, but it was stronger, I remember, than that of the Oklahoma Constitution. Oklahoma took their Ten Commandments down. So you look at this guy fighting this losing battle, but you also realize he's profited tens of thousands of dollars from donations and public interest.
And he's gotten a lot of popularity from his base.
Yeah. I imagine it must pay off. I see a lot of people absolutely disgusted with him, as well they should be. But I'm sure it's paying off in the long run. And it's to the point where there's enough of this going around, where you have enough of politicians pandering to a theocratic base, to the point that they're introducing flagrantly unconstitutional bills, proposing different lawmaking measures that are well outside their boundaries of authority and well outside of any understanding of the Constitution, that it really does seem problematic that there is no recourse to disciplinary action for even putting those types of things forward. In Britain, I know some things are put, these kind of lawmaking measures are put to a smell test to begin with. They're deliberated on to be found whether or not they're legal or not is put to the question before these things are deliberated upon. We just don't do that here, and people put things forward all the time just to pander to a majority or a perceived majority around them, and I think that's gotten really problematic. I think there should have been some repercussions for the politicians in Oklahoma who pushed and wasted taxpayer dollars on a Ten Commandments monument issue when they have school districts there that don't have the money to keep school open 5 days a week. And this was the fight their politicians jumped headlong into, and they were clearly on the wrong side of it and clearly wasting their time.
And I wouldn't really mind it too much if they were forced to put up all 613 commandments from the Old Testament. Everything about slavery. I mean, if you're going to put up the 10 commandments, you might as well put up the whole 613 too. all the crazy stuff. Right. But the idea that it's non-religious, well, and there's a reason it's not the edicts of Confucianism or the.
Right.
I mean, the idea that law started with the Ten Commandments. Well, we see the predecessors of the Ten Commandments themselves. I mean, everything about that argument is so wrong. Not the least of which is the fact that the commandments and the Constitution conflict with one another. They obviously don't inform one another. I mean, from the very start, it's an asinine argument. It's just a ridiculous one to even have to become involved in. But at the end of the day, you just have to look at the intentions. And what really irritates me is people are always looking at us and asking, well, what's your agenda? Why do you have to do this?
Right.
And seldom do they ask, why are they trying to force a Ten Commandments monument everywhere on public grounds? Why can't they keep it in their fucking churches? Why does it have to be on the Capitol?
They also pushed through a law that said that all school classrooms have to have a flag and "In God We Trust" in them. That was when they pushed through this session.
Oh, is that Arkansas?
Yeah, that's Arkansas too.
Oh, I'm sure that's little fucking Sunday school Rapert too.
I'm sure. And he's
right. Well,
the smarmy thing about him is he's found this ridiculous way to kind of double dip into the system where he's pushing those laws through, which is for political-minded people, he's getting campaign contributions, but he also has a ministry that I'm sure people are donating to.
Oh, he does.
Yeah.
And he's very open about that. And in fact, that was a kind of a question I had with some of the secular legal scholars about whether some of his advertising for or pandering for donations for his ministry, whether it was legal in the context of his holding a public office, because he has, social media pages dedicated to himself as a public official, where he's also asking for handouts for his ministry. And he's been shameless in overlapping the two. He has a website for Holy Ghost Ministries, and he talks in Holy Ghost Ministries about his work as a senator, spreading the word of the gospel and inserting the word of the gospel into his...
That's actually a pretty interesting question, because whenever they're trying to get a Planned Parenthood shut down or something, they always talk about how the money from abortions is fungible, even though because of the Hyde Amendment, no government's money is going towards abortion. They say that the money that they're bringing in from abortion is fungible to the business. I wonder if there's something there where, like, donating to his ministry, if he's using that money to run his campaign, then that would be a problem, right? I don't know.
Right.
That's just a thought.
If I remember correctly, he uses the same P.O. box for both his ministry and his campaign contributions.
Yeah,
so
that just sounds shady.
unless it's clearly marked one way or the other where it's supposed to go, he just has one large fund going on, and who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows how he's distributing that money, and who knows if he ever has to answer to it, because he has a ministry. And one thing we know about tax-exempt religious organizations is that they really have no accounting to do to anybody. It's not like a standard 501c3. They don't have to file at the end of the year. They don't have to answer to anything.
Madness.
Well, with that in mind, we're still looking into fulfilling the IRS requirements to go tax-exempt religious organization ourselves. I mean, disgusting as the system is in that way, they've, the comments from Sessions, the comments from the general Trump administration, just more and more, the more they broaden religious liberty and the more they allow privilege to the religious tax-exempt status, we're really just disadvantaging ourselves if we don't take advantage of it.
Right. For the longest time, it's been a moral position that TST and actually COS too, both organizations don't take the tax exemption.
Right. With COS, it seems like my understanding is that is an after the fact position that came after they failed to get their.
Oh.
But
well, that would happen back in early 70s or something like that, right?
Yeah, that's my understanding. But in our case, I was happy to hold that line so long as the Johnson Amendment was respected. But at the point where the Johnson Amendment is a dead letter, which it is now, and there were conflicting opinions on what that meant. I believe it was Americans United who said, well, hang on, nothing's happened yet. The Johnson Amendment is still there, but it was Freedom from Religion Foundation who said, and I agree with them, that, when you come out and say, as this presidency did, that nobody's to enforce a law, then it really isn't there anymore, obviously. And, for me, paying our taxes meant we were able to involve ourselves in politics. We were able to push for our Senate candidate in California, which we did. We were allowed to endorse a candidate of the House of Representatives in Arizona, which I did. But now you can do that anyway. I just refuse to have us at that disadvantage.
Right. And actually, that's in one of the talks you gave that came out 3 or 4 weeks ago. You were talking to, I want to say it was the Atheist Student Alliance, maybe, where
the Secular
Student Alliance, where you made a strong case for atheists not abandoning religion to theists, which I thought was a really good point.
Oh yeah, no, I think it's the most backward thing the atheist movement has done. If you look at the the wording of Jefferson, who was really the mastermind behind the legal codification of keeping church and state separate. He was very clear when elaborating on this in his biography. He made a law for Virginia keeping church and state separate, and he described it at length in his biography, talking about how he meant for religious points of view of all type to be protected, and he was clear that he meant religious protections to be for infidels and non-believers, as well as Jews and Muslims and Christians and anybody else. It was religious opinion, and it was clear that Jefferson was speaking to the issue of deeply held beliefs, and it didn't matter whether those were hinged upon superstition or not. And for a guy like Jefferson, it would be really bizarre and out of character if he were making an insistence that you need to have some kind of superstition to have protectable, deeply held beliefs. And I really think that is what the atheist community should be fighting for. If they want to hold to the fact that their opinions on religion aren't a religion, that's fine. But they should fight to have their deeply held beliefs, whatever they are, is equally protected as any of those of a religious, superstitious organization. And I don't think we should ever be in a situation where somebody has to claim religion to have a protection or exemption based upon their deeply held beliefs. I mean, people feel like we're doing that we're merely claiming religion. I argue that we are a religion, but further, I would argue that you shouldn't have to be a codified religion in order to make the claim of deeply held beliefs. If you're a conscientious objector, whatever else, if there's a certain set of ethics that defines who you are for you, and the only recourse you have to object to something that you find wholly objectionable, you should be able to make those objections on those grounds. Right. This is so fundamentally against the grain of your character that you need some kind of protection, and nobody should have the benefit of making that argument when nobody else does.
Well, I also think one of the things with this Johnson Amendment stuff is that giving that extra leeway to churches disadvantages a lot of secular 501c3s because they're held to a completely different standard than the religions are.
Well, holy shit. I mean, just look at the money laundering potential of this. Yeah. It makes religious organization just somewhere you can just dump your money and then it becomes an anonymized source of money to go to whatever you want. I mean, like I said, there's really no auditing and there's no real paperwork. So when they start funneling money to candidates, that's just money. That's just unaccounted for money. It just has to come from the religious organization. It goes in. That's where the accounting stops, and then it goes wherever it was meant to go thereafter. And I think that's why, people have a certain sense of what this could mean for the churches, and there hasn't been a shortage of religious organizations and religious representatives who are pushing back against the idea of defanging the Johnson Amendment, taking the Johnson Amendment away. I think they have an inclination of what will happen and that their churches will be beholden to, financiers who expect a certain amount of that money to go towards whatever they want it to go towards. And they, and the church itself will take a certain percentage. I think a lot of churches are going to be bought by this process, and they're going to be beholden to interests that have nothing to do with the congregation's so-called spiritual quest.
Then you have situations where there's like the Koch brothers paying off a preacher to say that their brand of paper is more godly than some other brand of paper. And
they don't even need the preacher to say anything. They just need the money to go from the religious organization to the candidate of their choice or to the corporation campaign or whatever of their choice. It's just I think it's a nice kind of way to anonymize the money by throwing it into the religious organization first.
Yeah. What you're saying is that the churches are going to be losing some sense of independence because they're going to be tied to these financial sources.
Right. And now you can have people within the churches kind of ignoring the political differences within their congregation. As the Johnson Amendment is diminished, and you have one party throwing large amounts of cash into the church because the church is dispersing it wherever they feel is appropriate, or however they run this scam, that's going to change the culture, I think, of a lot of religious communities. Yeah. Where their congregation is going to be openly taking a side, and that's going to drive a real wedge into religious communities where you're either on board with the politics or you're not, and churches will become just as polarized as
politicians.
Right, and
right. Because just as politicians have been bought, so are the churches going to be bought.
Yeah, and with Catholics, it turns out there's actually something of a near 50-50 split, if I understand correctly, between Democrats and Republicans. And with the killing of the Johnson Amendment, that's going to mean some real unrest, I think, in certain churches. I'm fine with all that, but but those are good reasons why I feel like even traditional churches should think twice about supporting this death of the Johnson Amendment.
What a lot of people who are religious and who don't like the wall, or the so-called wall between church and state, they don't realize that the wall is there to protect churches. It's there, at least in part, to protect churches from interference.
Well, I've tried to stay on point with that message when I speak to local press in Arkansas or wherever else where we're fighting for representation. I'm trying to get people to think about this differently, about the idea of a politician like Jason Rapert, Senator Rapert in Arkansas, trying to put up a Ten Commandments monument. I don't really understand why the religious community would look at that and feel that he's speaking for them, or that they've achieved some kind of conquest of the public land. I mean, they could very easily see it as the government trying to co-opt their voice, and trying to act as the owners of the religion itself. That they're also the voice of the religion as well as the voice of the community government, and that seems wildly inappropriate to anybody who would care about what the actual voice of the church is. I mean, the government's not supposed to take ownership of the church's voice, and I just, it's a little lost on me where this ever was thought to be a good idea, and still to this day, I'm not entirely sure what they're trying to achieve beyond, the movements of an early theocracy. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to argue against their point sometimes on those grounds, because it seems self-evidently a bad idea to me.
Just, this is so crazy. Why would you even think this? Yeah.
Yeah, and put so much effort into it, put so much time and put finances into this, and it's a losing battle, and even where it won, it's a very dubious value.
Yeah. So TST as a whole, it seems to me that there's been a lot of growth over the last year or so, is my general take. Like, I mean, you look at how many different chapters are doing things this October. It seems like engagement is up, I guess, is what a statistician would say.
it's I'm sure it's going to go up only a lot more. I'm working with one of the members of our national council, and we're putting together we're in the planning phases now, putting together an online platform, and we're looking at different formats that this platform would have, and we want it to be as interactive as it can be, so that there can be a really strong online community, something far more interactive than Facebook. And we're looking at a platform where people can upload different media files, work on music together, upload videos, and we have a live stream center stage. And for the live streaming, we could schedule different things for different chapters to do at set times, and even members, if they wanted to apply to take center stage at a certain point, and we have the live streaming. And we're looking at different kind of like porn sites for ideas on the layout, on how that could kind of look. It would have to be subscription based for us to maintain it, but we want to keep we're we definitely want the cost to be low enough that we could, both sustain it through the subscription, but it wouldn't be prohibitive for members to join. But then we think, if individual chapters are able to somewhat monetize their content as well, that it would really help chapters, break even at least on their events, encourage more chapter activity, and just encourage more engagement overall in the TST community. So we're looking for getting all that in order.
Here's a question. With any organization that gets larger and there's more money involved, what I've seen is that there's a greater tendency for stupidity and corruption. So what kind of measures are you guys taking to make sure that you don't devolve into some kind of weird groupthink, or what kind of checks and balances is going on?
Well, we're still always kind of trying to maintain that maximum balance of autonomy versus, centralized authority that makes sure everything's not going off the rails, and I feel like our national council has been very reliable with us so far. I think maybe where we're lucky is we're still not making a whole lot of money. So
yeah.
we're just trying to, right now, well, pretty much everybody's volunteer,
Yeah.
No, we don't have anybody on salary. So maybe that's when things would get really stupid and we need safeguards. I'm not sure. But so far, we're lucky in that the people we're working with are absolutely real believers in the cause, and there couldn't be any other reason for them working with us at this point right now.
Very good.
Yeah, and I know that chapter fundraisers are tough because there's always someone asking for more stuff. Like merch sales are just awkward.
Yeah, but we've got a whole new line of merch right now, so it's really helped. Everybody loves the new products we put online. I just put the new mugs we have on Facebook, and I was really surprised by the enthusiasm for those.
Tell me about your most popular mug. What does it look like?
I don't even know what the most popular one is. I don't know. Have you seen the new ones? They have these very kind of detailed, impressed images into them, and they're this kind of classical pottery type of mug. But I don't know. I didn't know mugs would be such a big deal, but I don't think we've ever gotten such an enthusiastic response on a product we've put on social media as we have with these. So online sales have been good this month, but we also have all new T-shirt designs and things like that too. But yeah, that's a difficult thing to keep up with. I mean, when you're financing yourself through merchandise sales, that can wax and wane pretty radically. And with fundraising in general, when you have an idea out there and you're fundraising for the legal support you're going to need or whatever else, you're only getting donations for as long as this is in the press, and sometimes you need some high profile press to actually get the finances to pursue the campaign.
Sure.
So if we're, top of the social media news trend for a couple days, we're getting some good financing in that time. Can be by the third day that it drops off entirely.
Yeah.
Right.
And we're still not at that point yet where we have real benefactors who come through for us regularly. We just don't have that, so it's always kind of case by case and kind of dependent upon the media presentation of what we're doing.
Right.
It
does seem like it. I know it's the end of the month now, but at headquarters it seemed like you were doing something every day, every couple days, all month long.
Oh yeah. October is crazy in Salem. Salem's a nice small ase, and it's usually really quiet, centralized. You can walk around. October, it's just stupid. The streets are full. It's like a massive festival, and Salem gets lost itself in the crowd. You don't even see it anymore. You don't even have a feel for what Salem is when you're there. It's just a mob of people. And the ludicrous thing is there's just not that many places to go. There's just not a whole lot to do there, and yet there's masses of people just out on the streets. But that's That's also the time where the businesses make all their money for the year. It's, Halloween is to Salem what Christmas is to most other retail in the U.S. And we have been getting a lot more visitors to the headquarters in the gallery. And so far, they've been really pleasant visitors.
It's good. I was wondering about that.
We'll see what happens these last couple weeks, but so far everybody's been very supportive. More and more people are understanding the value in what we do, whether they choose to identify with us or not.
Yeah, I was wondering about that because I know, I was up there in May, and everybody who lives in Salem seemed perfectly okay with it. I was wondering how the tourists
phone calls all the time. People call every day and complain about us. They'll call and Ash will answer the phone and somebody will start berating him just because they've called the Satanic Temple and they can do that, I guess. But we've also had it where a couple weeks ago I was over there and we didn't realize it. It wasn't until I looked at one of the security cameras and saw on the monitor that there were police all around the house. I said, oh, shit. And I went down because I hadn't heard them knocking. And I came out, and already the police, even though they came out in force, seemed pretty confident that nothing was actually going on. But they said they had received a call that some kind of abduction or murder or something was going on in the house.
Oh.
And they just asked, well, is anything going on in the house? And I said, no. And the police officer asked, do you have any idea who could have called? And I said, well, no. And he said, sounded like somebody with a southern accent. And I said, well, what did the caller ID say? I asked the police what the caller ID said, whether the call had come from down south somewhere, what the area code was. And they actually said they don't have caller ID at the station.
Oh my God.
I shit you not. Yeah. But I did have the feeling that the call probably came from somewhere down south, probably was nobody local. And some asshole probably had the idea that so long as they could just get the police to go there, they would see something terrible going on and we would be arrested.
Right.
Whatever.
Or they just did it.
But really, we've had no trouble with the locals. The locals, the police, anything. And only the street preachers. The street preachers this time of year, they get out and they berate people that they're going to hell. And we've been out. We have a merchandise table out on the strip in the downtown area, and we also have pamphlets that talk about what our gallery is that people can take. So when the street preachers come and they're berating people, and we simply stand next to him, and we have our Satanic Temple banner, and we have our brochures and everything. People are grabbing those brochures just in solidarity, just to show, just as a fuck you to the street preacher.
Right.
Yeah. Everybody hates that guy. So if anything's driven traffic into our gallery, it's been these street preachers who just won't leave people alone, screaming in their ears.
That's great.
And that's just a microcosm, really, of the bigger story here. I mean, the more the theocrats push their hand, and the more oppressive they are, the more we have these politicians like Raper trying to force their ministry into people's faces. The more people look at us in a very sympathetic way and are willing to hear us out.
Lucien, I just want to clarify something for the audience. This guy's real name is Raper. It isn't like you're making this up.
Rapert, yeah, it's just Raper with T at the end, right?
Okay.
What I think you need to do? I think you need to start doing some YouTube videos that are dramatic readings of some of the hate mail.
Yeah, that's you've probably been seeing ideas like that on my Twitter feed lately. That idea comes up every so often. People are always intrigued by the idea of the hate mail.
I think it could be like mean tweets. I think it'd be fun.
Yeah, my favorite ones are always the simple ones. So the real long ones in all capital letters, those are very repetitious. But I think you probably saw my current background banner on Facebook where some guy who looked like an ex-pro wrestler left a comment apparently in regards to our are making the bigoted bakers make the Satan cakes. You left a comment on my page that just said, "I'm gonna bake you a cake with God's name on it." I thought that was the most benign threat I've ever received.
Right.
This man is gonna bake me a cake with God's name on it. And of course, there was the message from Brazil which got lost in translation, where
this is my favorite, yeah,
where it said, "Satan, you go ass, Jesus Christ, Lord." That's become legend within TST circles, and "Satan, you go ass" has become part of a common phrase thrown around for just about everything now.
Wonka put it on a T-shirt.
Yeah. He didn't give me one of those T-shirts, motherfucker.
We'll get you next time.
He was just here.
So, man, we only got like 10 minutes left. I was gonna try and get into Gray Faction stuff. I don't know if 10 minutes is enough time to really get into that too much. Because we talked about that a bit last time you were on.
Yeah. Well, Gray Faction is something I'm always coming back to and trying to work on. You guys really should have Sarah on sometime. Sarah Ponto Rivera, the director of Gray Faction.
Oh yeah,
she's working on that full time. That's what she's doing. But we're still going through the archive material. We got all together Satanic Panic material. We recently went to a private library and scanned a whole shitload of material related to the Satanic Panic, related to practices of people involved in the ISSTD, licensing disputes and legal suits, and we're sifting through all of that material now. And some of that material was an archive of Satanic Panic video material, videos made for law enforcement training purposes on occult crimes, real raw panic stuff, stuff that doesn't need to be debunked because it's so ludicrous on its face, some of it. But we're also sifting through and just looking for material that may have been missed, material related to some of the people who are still in practice now that we're looking to have the licenses reevaluated on. And in case that sounds obscure to anybody not familiar with the topic, the issue is mostly licensed health, professional mental health licensed characters. I think I disordered my words there, but people in the mental health field still using debunked therapeutic practices to make people recall allegedly repressed memories of satanic ritual abuse, alien abduction, whatever else. That still kind of propagate satanic panic paranoia. Mm-hmm. We still are yet to turn in our petition against Massachusetts licensed mental health professional Neil Brick, who runs these conferences that talk about satanic ritual abuse, mind control, and mind control triggering in the way of touching one's face. Oh, yeah. I just don't know what it's going to take for us to break new ground in this, though. I mean, previously I felt like we had such a strong petition against Ellen Lachter, who, arguably her malpractice, or mental health malpractice, was instrumental in the murder of a child, and yet the petition was obviously not really deliberated upon by the governing board. I just don't know what we can do to bring more attention to this, or make it something that the government actually takes action on. Yeah, and I think maybe we'll have to appeal to an attorney general at some point. Maybe that's our next step in California. Maybe that's what we'll have to do with Neil Brick. But I just feel like at a certain point, when people know that people this delusional and deranged are working in the mental health field and propagating insanity, rather than giving people a basis for reality.
Yeah, then, I mean, it'd be one thing if okay, fine, this person's a therapist and they have crazy ideas, but someone comes to them with a problem and they leave feeling better, fine, right? Like if they can keep that separate. But the thing that blew my mind about the ISSTD stuff was when I was reading through some of their materials, there was a thing where like, well, okay, if someone comes in with dissociative identity disorder, they'll be presenting with 2 to 4 personalities, and then by the end of treatment, you can expect them to have 12 to 14 personalities. I'm like, how is that fixing things?
Right, but you will also find a lot of material within the ISSTD camp openly stating that you're going to get worse before you get better. I mean, this is common knowledge in those circles that the therapy itself is going to make for some awful times for the person undergoing it. And I'm sure that also comes with a belief that the ultimate getting better is the only way to get better. But with the lack of empirical support for that, and with the very real history of people getting suicidal, becoming otherwise paranoid, distressed, and in just a horrific state, you'd think people would be a bit more circumspect about this type of therapy and really consider what the empirical proofs are.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing to me that 30 years in or more, we're still talking about this issue and it hasn't been confronted in any real way.
Yeah. There was an interesting analogy for it. I thought, I'm going to talk about comic books for a second, but there was there's a book called Arkham Asylum that Grant Morrison wrote. And there was an entire section in there where they were talking about how the psychiatrists were trying to treat Two-Face by weaning him off of a coin and then onto a D6 and then onto a D20. And like it was very similar to what it sounds like they do in this kind of treatment, where they just keep fragmenting one person into thinking that they've got lots of other things going on.
Right. Or contextualizing their wild mood swings into being completely discrete personalities,
right,
to the point that they have what is essentially a possession narrative, and one that also kind of exonerates them from any personal responsibility.
Right, because that wasn't me. That was my alter or whatever, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And what I've seen when I've been amongst these kinds of survivor support groups is just this kind of infantile behavior from people who are invested in this, but it's a cultivated infantile behavior, and it's one that they have really developed some serious character flaws and a real inability to even make themselves ask rational questions about what they're doing, because anything that's invalidating must be kept at a distance. It becomes very insular and very cult-like, and it makes for some very defective mental practices, I think. And there's no way I can see any of it as being therapeutic.
Yeah. Well, Lucien, we're coming up on the end of the hour. So is there anything that you wanted to touch on that we didn't get into?
No.
That's what you said last time, too.
Really? Really?
I know I've got a thing coming up with the local NBC affiliate over here about the Boston Invocation, trying to see
right.
If our chapter head over here is available to speak to NBC, or if I'm going to have to do it. I don't want to steal their thunder or whatever, but I have a feeling that's going to turn into a battle too. And I feel like it's really foolish for Boston to fuck with us on this one, because despite the large Catholic population in Boston, we also have a huge progressive and liberal population. I think it's just a bad move for the city council to act in discriminatory fashion over here.
Well, if that public meeting is anything like the one in Arizona,
I have no idea. I think it would be a bit less like the one in Arizona, in that I could not tell you what I think the balance would be. I think angry Catholics would show up in numbers, but I also think people very much in our support would show up in numbers as well.
Right. And
this is just simply an issue the city council shouldn't have taken sides on.
And that's the thing that blows my mind about.
They should neutrally respect a claim to the right to give the invocation.
Yeah, and that's the thing that blows my mind about the invocation stuff, because if the city council would just quietly say okay and let somebody come in and say their it's like 130 words tops for that invocation.
Right. And the city council should recognize the authority to say no. And if they would clearly stand by that position from the beginning, I think, then the whole issue would be presented a bit differently. Yeah. The public deliberation then would be this is discussing whether they felt the invocation policy should be in place or not. They should understand from the outset that these invocations are not meant to be those that are sanctioned by the city council. They should be made to understand the issue that this is, and do you want an open forum, or not? Yeah. We see that people don't understand that, and they didn't understand that in Arizona either.
Oh no, they had no clue.
Arizona seemed to understand it as the city council allowing a religious organization to give the invocation as acceptance and endorsement of that religion.
Right. Well, it'll be interesting to see how that turns out.
Yeah.
All right. So, plugs. I mean, obviously, satanictemple.com, Shop Satan.
Oh, yeah. .com, Shop Satan. Follow me on Twitter. That's been something I've actually been using. At Lucien Greaves. And keep up with our Facebook, the main Facebook TST page to see what's going on in the news and on event-wise as well.
Yeah.
And keep an eye out for the online platform that we should be developing when
yeah, that sounds fascinating.
William's done with his ogre. Yeah.
All right, man.
Well, sounds very exciting.
It is. So much stuff on the way.
Woohoo! Stuff.
Satan stuff. All right. Well, thanks a lot. It's always fun talking to you.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Anytime.